So I just wanted to introduce us to Travis Jez, the vegetation specialist for the Texas Department of Transportation. He's a member of Round Rock, he's originally from Round Rock, Texas. He's a 7th generation East Williamson County resident. He has a degree in agriculture with an emphasis in plant and soil science. He is currently a vegetation specialist for TxDOT. He determines the seeding plans for the agency for native wildflowers and grasses. He also oversees the erosion control program, which also utilizes these native plants. His topic tonight is Texas wildflower and native grass seeding programs. Thank you, Travis.
Thank each of you. Good evening to y'all. And if y'all give me just a moment, I'll share my screen with you. A lot of what I have tonight and what I found over the years, I've been with TxDOT, by the way, for about 7 years, just a little bit more on that. And prior to that, I was with the Department of Agriculture and a couple other jobs I had. I was also the state trapper for Williamson County for a short bit of time. But so we, I just kind of want to touch base. My slideshow is going to be not but about 2 or 3, 4 handfuls of slides just to kind of tell you a little bit about what we do and who we are. I do encourage a lot of talking because I think we'll get more out of what I do and things of that sort. So let's go ahead and share my screen. All right. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay. You see me going back and forth. All right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, do y'all need me on camera? Let's do that. Okay, that's not going to work. So let's just do this. All right. So what I'd like to talk to y'all today about is TxDOT, where we are, where we were, and where are we going. Okay. So a little bit about the past of TxDOT, and this is really a very important part of what we do. And there was a memorandum that came out many years ago, and it said, don't mow until the wildflowers have gone to seed. And that was stated back in 1937. And, you know, things have changed over the years. We've had a lot of different eras and droughts and things of that sort, but we've always kept this mission in our minds, and everything that we do today really bases around what we do for the wildflower program. And we see the impact and the productivity of our wildflowers and how, you know, what it brings to the state of Texas. So, you know, TxDOT's worked really hard towards enhancing the beautification of the right-of-ways for years, for multiple years. And we continually preserve the right-of-ways by practicing proper mowing and herbicide applications. And we'll talk a little bit about that. I get a little bit more into mowing than I do the herbicide applications, and I'm sure I'm going to have questions on both, and I welcome them. So when we get to the end, we'll definitely make sure and talk about that. So let's talk a little bit about our mowing. So, you know, mowing for TxDOT is very critical. And the main reason for our mowing, first and foremost, is to protect the traveling public. And we have to get some of that vegetation down. And we'll talk about timing of mowing in a little bit. But what we found over the years is our mowing actually enhances our wildflower program. It's kind of like Mother Nature dropping the seed back to the ground. And like I said earlier, 2 slides back, that we talk about how in general, we look at when the wildflowers have set seed. When do we have hard seed? And we know we can't wait till every single flower sets hard seed, because we have to get in there at some point and start. And so that's one of the main reasons we mow. So there again, wildflower set seed. TxDOT emphasizes this in order to have wildflowers for the next year. Now, mind you, and y'all probably spend more time out looking at things, and sometimes I'm able to. And certain years, certain flowers do very well. Our wildflowers are very diverse, and different things happen throughout the year, and different ones like here, like the bee balm or lemon mint. You know, 2 years ago or the year prior to COVID, it's kind of funny how we always talk about COVID and we gear different years off of that. But I'll tell you, my bee balm out at the farm did extremely well, to the point where we had multiple hives try and move into our barns that well. So And this year we didn't have any bee balm. It was more of a kind of a, I believe a term that people use now is firewheel. I still call it the Indian blanket. Was really, really good this year. But so our mowing reduces the cool season component to allow warm season grass establishments. You know, when we do go in there and mow in our fall mowing specifically, our fall mowing opens the ground up and gets everything prepped, if you will, for the spring, for the growing of our wildflowers in the spring. Now, if we have a good wildflower program, it does knock back a lot of our invasive plants, and we'll talk about that when we get into herbicides. Like I said, I just touched on that just a little bit, and we'll talk about our invasive plants. But if anybody wants to guess what our most invasive plant, I would say in our right-of-way throughout the entire state of Texas is, I'm unable to see the chat right now, but I'll go ahead and tell you all what that is, and that is Johnson grass. Johnson grass is a major problem for most everybody. I know in the ag side, in my world, outside of work, Johnson grass is a major problem. And all of us have seen driving down the highway the amount of Johnson grass that we have. If we have too much Johnson grass, we're not going to get our wildflowers. So you might see us out there spraying at some point in some of those areas and think, why are they spraying all that? Well, a lot of times if we're spot spraying in those areas like we should be, we have so much Johnson grass, nothing else is going to grow. Same thing with our mowing. So we'll continue on here. So 7-inch minimum height allows perennials to flourish by being in the sun's full range. We talked a little bit about that. 7-inch minimum will not harm our milkweed overall and other late blooming pollinators. Now, let me bring that up, and I know it's a hot topic, and I believe in it too, and that is the milkweeds. I'll give you an example. Where I sit right now is outside of between Hutto and Taylor at my farm, and we had a wonderful milkweed production on Highway 79, specifically on the south side, coming out of Hutto this year. I've been coming out here 25 years. I have never seen that amount of milkweed. Did not see that amount of milkweed before we mowed, and I'm off in the right of way out there quite often. The mowing spurred that off, and it helped it out quite a bit. So we also established some non-mow areas for fall pollinator habitat, and this also reduced some maintenance costs. Now, mind you, when we go into mow, we have 800,000 mowable, sprayable acres, okay? We have roughly 1.2 million acres total. And with our 800,000 acres, and this is a very rough amount of money, but it costs us roughly $24 million every time we send the mowers in. We send them in twice a year. So we always say roughly $50 million to mow every year. Again, if we don't mow, most of the time we have too high of weeds, things of that sort. And I will tell you this, if my family's driving down the road and they need to pull over, I want them to be able to pull over safely and see what's around them, as well as not hit a pig or a deer or something else of that sort. So again, where we are, so back in 1932, of course, thereabouts, TxDOT has used, since then we've used native flowers and grasses to line out our 800,000 acres. We sow about we purchase about 30,000 pounds a year, and we sow about 15,000 acres. Now that fluctuates, and that's this year, I think I did the rough math on it a couple of weeks ago for a project, and we were around 16,200 acres. And that's trackable acres. That doesn't include a lot of the maintenance part. I'm on the maintenance side. That's the construction part and partly maintenance. But there's a lot of other stuff that a district might go out and just put some wildflowers out or seeding out. Then we jump into the native grasses and wildflowers help provide food for pollinators, habitat for the wildlife. And when we talk about habitat for wildlife, we're talking about your bugs and your bees and your monarchs, not necessarily your deer. And I keep going back to pigs because I've dealt with them a good portion of my life. We don't really want those on the right of way, neither are the deer, okay? And then it also promotes water conservation and erosion control. So that's always a big positive, our native grasses. And we'll talk about where our native grasses come from, and hopefully we can entertain some questions on that in a little bit. So we go on to, we need to preserve these investments, and TxDOT practices integrated vegetation management. We're really looking at a long-term I think that terminology might change, the integrated vegetation management. When, my coworker, man, and I really got to talk in this past year or 2 years, and a term that we want to get to at some point is regenerative. We want that right away to be able to maintain itself. And we can do that if we plant the correct grasses and we have a maintenance program up front where those grasses can take over and continue to thrive and rebuild our soils and maintain themselves. So TxDOT's mowing practices encourage and supports pollinator habitat by strategically delaying the mowing to ensure wildflower seed. And that's probably the third time y'all have heard me say this, but we use that. Again, our mowers have to start at some time and they have to end at some time. If we get too late in the season, we get into the winter season and we get into wetness and things of that sort. Also, mind you, I didn't touch base on this on the last last slide, but the amount of mowers that we have now is roughly in the ballpark of 1/5 to maybe 1/8 what used to be. TxDOT doesn't mow their own right-of-ways anymore. It's all contracted out. So installation of non-mow areas for wildlife habitat establishment and preservation. Each TxDOT district has a vegetation manager. Now that vegetation manager, so we have 25 districts in the state. We have a dedicated vegetation manager in each one of those districts. Myself, I'm a vegetation specialist. It's just a title that was given to me. I assist those managers throughout the state, as well as my coworkers. So those managers oversee the proper application and techniques that we put out there, which vary by road type and function. So depending on the type of road, where it's located, because we're such a vast state, those functions, how we do those things might change a little bit from, let's say, Williamson County getting 30+ inches a year to El Paso, which might get, I don't know what they get, 11. And most of that all comes in July and August during the monsoon season. So by establishing the sustainable vegetation management programs that specifically address wildflower preservation and protection, TxDOT has maintained biodiversity. We've gone out there, we have some type of biodiversity in our right of way. And that's all by, in doing so, we can reduce the mowing and maintenance cost. So we'll go on and talk a little bit about our education and outreach. This kind of really touches home for me. I have one of my safety rest areas, and that's what we're going to talk about in a minute, that I call my home rest area, right? So I don't know if many of you have visited a safety rest area, let's say now compared to 20 or 30 years ago. They've really changed. TxDOT has taken the initiative to step up and really do some great things with our rest areas. If it be just the diversity that's in the rest area. Also remember, before I forget, safety rest areas are safety areas. So in the event of a disaster, most of them have a storm shelter. So we have 12 travel information centers. They're strategically throughout the state. And then we have roughly 80 safety rest areas in over 21 major highways. I do work with, as well, one of my practices at work is to work with the safety rest area group. And what we're doing there is working with the Monarch Highway. And so we promote public awareness of the monarch butterfly, the honeybee and pollinator conservation, as well as the Central Flyway Migratory Path. We dedicated I-35 to this. It's a very good depiction of what we're trying to go for. And that's kind of where our main response is to get our word out, because as you know, I-35 is just crazy with traffic. So we organize educational materials, protect and manage pollinator habitats, and develop strategies for pollinator-friendly seed mixes. So we'll take it a step further. And there I am putting some flowers in several years ago. But back in 15, we kind of did a working agreement with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Native Plant Society, to allow those entities to come in basically and put in these monarch stations or these pollinator stations. And I will use the word pollinator, and typically I just use the word pollinator habitat, because how we feel with TxDOT is if we maintain a proper pollinator habitat, we were going to take care of the monarch as well. We were going to take care of that honeybee, that the other types of possibly the other types of bugs and things of that sort that come through. But what we did is, we've worked with these groups to come into our stations, our safety rest areas, and this one being the Bell County rest area, I can't remember. This is either Bell County. Excuse me. That's going to be Hill County. That's the Hill County rest area. The picture is. And so let me go on through this, and then I'll go back to actually some of the things we're doing there. These areas provide resources necessary for monarch butterflies to reproduce and continue their migration. And again, it's dedicated. The monarch has done some wonderful things for TxDOT, and in the sense of awareness. Again, I'm going to backtrack here just a little bit, and I think that if everybody understands that we are doing what we can as far as taking care of pollinator habitat, the monarch will fall in line with that. And so she, he, it, I always call her she has done wonderful things for us to propel what we're doing forward. So each area includes educational signage and opportunities for travel public to engage in monarch conservation. We are real big into our outreach. Think about this, our safety rest areas, I don't have a number of people that stop through there. I know our Bell County safety rest area, I've got some property down the road from there, so I stop there often just to stretch my legs, walk around, see the place, see if anybody has any questions. Just the word of mouth. Somebody coming in and reading this sign, the longest garden with the little picture, the picture on the top left corner, that's Lady Bird Johnson, talks a little bit about it. How great is that? Not only for TxDOT, but for the public, and passing that information along. So I love these three pictures. I know it kind of looks like crazy. It's all one. I didn't want to take them apart because I think it looks really cool with all three of them together. So my coworker, Amanda Fowler, and I were driving, golly, I don't know. We were going to, maybe it was Midland, or I don't know, but we were headed west, and back in 19. So we needed to get out, walk around a little bit. We'd been on the road for multiple hours. And so we walked down to this, we went out, we walked around a little bit. We walked down to this little pond or tank or whatever you want to call it, pond, the retention area. And it was full of these willow type trees. And it looked like it was just shuddering. It was amazing. And she turns around to me, she goes, "Look at this." And I said, "What in the heck is going on?" There were thousands of monarchs sitting in there. The interesting thing was, this was on the downwind side. The wind was out of the south that day. So they were all hanging out there, kind of taking a break and out of the wind. And then you kind of look through the trees there. This picture doesn't show it, but you look down at the water source, and they were dipping down in there. And I don't know if they were going for water or what, or it was cooler, I don't know. But there were thousands of these monarchs. I've never seen it. I've been in this business a lot of years. I've never seen this before. Some of you might have seen the migration through. Again, this was the southern migration. As we know, they kind of go out a little bit more to West Texas. My opinion of that is because they're trying to get there's a good they're taking advantage of the monsoons, the July, August monsoons in West Texas, and so we have a lot of growth, a lot of green up with a lot of our pollinators, and they can feed headed south. I'm sure there's a lot better understanding of that, or there's a technical way of that, but so this was a wonderful picture, and I wanted to share that with y'all. So a little bit about our seeding. So in the top right corner here, it's one of our seeding plots. So it's not ours specifically. So we work with universities such as Texas A&M University Kingsville, my old alma mater, and then also Tarleton State, AgriLife Research, and Sol Ross. We work with a lot of different entities and looking at what we should be looking for in our right-of-way. Our main person that we're dealing with is out of the Caesar Clayburgh Research Institute, if you're familiar with that, and that is out of Kingsville, out of A&M Kingsville, on campus there, and it is called the Texas Native Seed Project. It used to be called the South Texas Native Seeds, which I still call them STN, but the Texas Native Seed Project. I've been working with them for 7 years, and TxDOT's been with them for a lot of years. But just to kind of give you a little bit of background with them, they go out and they gather seed throughout the state, different areas and what have you. And let me just kind of give you an example. If we go in and we pull a little blue stem, let's say from Williamson County, and then we go out to, or we go down to South Texas and pull it, different ones have different growth characteristics. And so what they do is they grow them out in what I call these blocks, these breeder blocks, and they evaluate them. Now, this one I believe is in Stephenville. We have one in Alpine, one in the Valley, one in Kingsville, one in Midland, Odessa, one in Stephenville, and we have our newer one, which is in Houston area. That is looking at, the Houston one is looking at the things for the Gulf Coast region. Excuse me. So this work has resulted in basically, and I updated this one yesterday, 41 new native seed mixed varieties with both native grasses and pollinator plants in them. And they've made significant advances, okay? And when I say significant, I mean leaps forward. The nice thing about Cesar Clayburgh, when I was in college, I was able to work for the Plant Materials Center. They call them PMCs, and they're through USDA. And that was one of my jobs in college. And I worked in the one in Kingsville, and they do this kind of work where they look at varieties and they do plant releases and things of that sort. Now, the difference between them and the TAMUT group or the Texas Native Seed group is Texas Native Seed kind of, I won't say fast tracks it as far as the research, but they have more resources to move through and work quicker through what we're doing, what we're needing. So as a result of this research, seeding specifications have changed for, excuse me, for over 2/3 of the TxDOT 25 districts. And what I want to add on that right now is I'm in the middle of redoing our it's called Item 164. You're more than welcome to look that up, TxDOT Item 164. And those items state what TxDOT is supposed to plant in the right-of-way for revegetation. If it be permanent revegetation, temporary cool, temporary warm. And within those mixes, you're always going to find some forbs, and some in those forbs, usually some type of pollinator. And so it's very interesting how that works. But what I really want to, and this is, y'all are the first ones literally to hear this in the public. We are taking all of the Bermuda grass out of all of our rural plantings. We only had about 8 left, 8 districts left, 7 or 8 left, but we are on track for now to take the rest of the Bermuda grass out. So on the rural plantings, if everything goes right, stars align, we will not have any Bermuda grass in our plantings. Now, that being said, the question is going to come up, well, what about our urban? So the key on the urban is we work a lot with cities. And in our urban areas, which is typically within city limits, they get mowed very frequently and sometimes very short. And as you might know, our native grasses do not like constant mowing, and they do not like mowing short. In doing so, you'll kill them. So again, one reason our Bermuda grass is in there. Now, does that mean we will never use Bermuda grass again? No, it does not. It has a lot to do with slope, soil type, things of that sort. We have to have something that will hold the soil together. Now, all that being said, most of our natives are clump grasses. So in this picture, top picture here, you can see that's more of a sandy loam type soil. If that is in a high rainfall area or my slope, 3-to-1, 4-to-1, whatever it might be, is too steep, I have to get something in there that will hold the ground together among these plants, which I'm still going to plant natives, but we have to have something intersparse in there. So we'll move forward. TxDOT will continue to foster collaborative partnerships with entities focused on providing habitat for pollinators, as well as propagating native seeds for use along our roadways. And that's just one way of looking of one of our partnerships. We have others, but this is our main one. We all have the end result of what we want. We want native grasses. We want native wildflowers. And we all get there a different way, but we're all on the same page. So I think that's very, very important. So again, where are we at with kind of in-house with TxDOT? So we train TxDOT licensed herbicide applicators. We have roughly 1,300 of them, and of licensed employees. I take care of their licenses for them, And it shifts. Sometimes we have 1,100, sometimes we have 1,300. It just depends. TxDOT has that. It's just how it works back and forth. So, you know, we work with them. We train them. We do the pesticide recertification courses. So you can rest assured they've been taught properly. Myself and my coworkers, we were trained extensively before we go out and train these operators. So we train them in vegetation and wildflower identification, proper herbicide timing and applications. And obviously it's mandatory training. So we are licensed, and being licensed and such, the Department of Agriculture, which is over those licenses ultimately, say you have to have your CUs. You have to sit there for a whole day once a year and within TxDOT and listen to, you know, TxDOT talk to you about proper herbicide timing and applications and, you know, identification. So some of the other things, we educate and support the districts. We do that through pamphlets and wildflower guides, and we, you know, talk to them about the importance of the pollinator plants, their placement, where they need to go, how they propagate, and how to maintain them. You know, what is the maintenance behind them? Because it's not just one and done. So we also talk to them about seed mix recommendations. I'm constantly, weekly doing seed mix recommendations. And one thing I do want to talk about seed recommendations, if you ever do call me for recommendation, it could be different today than it is tomorrow. And the reason being is because I have a very good working relationship with most of your seed companies in the state. And I talk to them weekly, probably at least. And and seed is a commodity, and it's priced and sold as such. So just like corn at the granary or cotton in the cotton gin, when it's gone, and there's no more till next year. So we come up, you know, and I'll go back to the item 164 because I think this is a good time to tell you, we have these mixes. There are so many entities in the state of Texas that follow our recommendations, even down to our herbicide applications. They follow what we're planting in the right of way. And when we plant that stuff in the right of way, when we plant those plants in the right of way, sometimes we can't get a hold of everything that's in our spec. Seed companies know what's in our spec. We don't necessarily can't get it because you have the power line companies. The big one the last 3 years was the pipeline companies in South Texas, and they just gobble it all up. So there's other things we can do, other things we can bring into the program, or we can just up our rates on some of the other grasses. So where are we going? Where's all this coming to? What's our future? Is it going to be all education? I don't have the glass ball like this picture is. I don't have that. I wish I did. But what we want to do first and foremost is, again, we want to educate everybody. But I'm going to jump off into the Candidate Conservation Agreement with Assurances, the CCAA. And you know, this is a new path, it's been around. TxDOT's been working on this for multiple years, but we finally signed the agreement, and it's a very interesting situation. So what does this agreement do? It provides regulatory assurances to participants. So, you know, we went ahead and got on board with the CCAA in the event that, let's say, the monarch were to get listed, okay, way down the line, she gets listed. Then we're already in with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and these other organizations saying, and they've already said, look, TxDOT, you've already told us what you're doing. We know what you're doing. We're kind of watching, and y'all just report to us, you know, what's going on and what's not going on. And within that agreement, it kind of says, okay, well, you know, if we have a disaster on the right of way somewhere, what we need to do to remediate that. And what it does is it gives us an assurance that if she does get listed, then we're ahead of the game. And U.S. Fish and Wildlife knows, hey, TxDOT's already on board. They're already working on what they're doing. So promotes conservation of the monarch butterfly, conservation measures, supplementary measures. And so that's kind of the gist. Well, I think I got one more slide on that. So we enrolled 100% of our land, which is 1.238 million. I just always say 1.2. Of that, the adopted acres that we keep an eye on every year, and those areas move around the state, which is 446,000 and change. That's a lot of land. It's a whole lot of land. You know, I was talking earlier about how many acres do we have that we maintain, that's maintainable acres of 800,000. You know, when you really put a pencil to that, The only larger landowner right now in the state of Texas is the King Ranch at 825. So, you know, that's a lot of land to manage and a lot of diversity of land. So of the 446 adopted acres are where conservation measures are pledged. So those pledged measures are, you know, understand the timed and limited mowing, targeting our targeted herbicide use, making sure we're doing that properly. We also have non-mow areas, and those non-mow areas are areas that would be outside the typical mow. And so the typical mow areas, let's just say 15 feet, that's a full width. It would be something off of that. And we do mow those on occasion if we have to, because they get overgrown or we have a bunch of invasives coming in there. Those are really good habitat. So the other thing I want to talk a little bit about, which I thought was interesting, is the Green Ribbon Project. Now, the Green Ribbon Project is actually run by the Landscape Division at TxDOT. I'm fortunate that I get to help spend some of the money, and I'll explain that. So the Green Ribbon Project is set up for non-attainment and near non-attainment districts who qualify for air quality issues. An example, Houston, Corpus just got listed. Waco actually is listed. Tyler District is listed. These are the districts, to name a couple. Now, of that, and I don't want to jump too far into this, but of that, all the construction in those districts, those areas, quarter of 1%, excuse me, half of 1% of what it costs to do the construction project goes back into beautification. So let me give you an example. Some of you might drive down I-35. Some of you might drive the toll road. Have you seen those big projects of what they call mob planting of the trees and such? Okay, that some of that money for that comes from this Green Ribbon money. We are slowly, and we are way ahead of where we were, using those funds for wildflower planting to the sum of probably about $1 million or $2 million a year. So very, very interesting. So I've got 2 slides and then we're going to get into some questions, but I wanted to put this out there. And my coworker and I, we've been trying to come up with a slogan of some sort to represent us as far as the maintenance division and such. So fall for flowers. That's it. Hashtag fall for flowers. And to me, that has 2 different meanings. First off, fall, the time of year for flowers. Now's the time. Now's the time to get out there and plant your flowers. I will get more phone calls in the spring because everybody sees wildflowers and they want to go plant. Fall. That's when we plant. That's when TxDOT plants. That's when we're planting. The other one is fall for flowers, and that's just it. Fall for flowers. So I'm going to open it up for questions as soon as I get off this screen, and we can talk for a little bit.
Yeah, so you were talking about trying to do away with using Bermuda grass in the deal, and then one of our members was asking, could that be replaced with something like buffalo grass instead?
It absolutely can, and honestly, that we are looking at that. We are absolutely looking at that. That is on the table. It's on the table. So I do see one of the questions here. It says, what are you doing to eradicate invasive bastard cabbage? Well, if I could find somebody to eat it, we would be okay. We do spray bastard cabbage. It gets away from us year to year. I can't tell you this, you go up and down I-35, specifically north. Some years it's worse than others, but we do spray that in the fall. With our herbicides, some of our herbicides have cutoff dates because we don't want to, it leaves a soil residual and will affect our wildflowers. But on the bastard cabbage, what we tell the guys is that, or ladies also that spray for us, if we have bastard cabbage, as you know, it's going to be, it's very invasive in the sense that it covers a lot of ground. So we do spray it as quickly as possible. Sometimes we can get to it in time, sometimes we can't. We only have, if y'all think about this, if we have some contractors that spray for us, but we only have about 386 trucks for the entire state. So we get to it as quickly as we can.
One of our other members, Jack, was asking, how has a long-term climate change impacted your plantings? And, what changes are you making to your program to address different potential impacts?
So that question actually came up some time back to me. I won't address climate change directly, but plants, the ability to plants to, I'm not going to use the word mutate, but to change is quicker than humans could. And that's all. That's really where we're at with that right now. We haven't really looked at long-term climate change and with the plants at this point.
And while we're waiting for other questions, I'm going to go ahead and ask mine. You mentioned those mob plantings. What are they doing with? What do they do with those mob plantings?
I'm going to have to refer you to landscape division.
So that's landscape that does it, and not.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's landscape division does what I call them mob plantings. The idea is that I don't know the exact idea behind them. I don't know.
Okay, and somebody asked, how do you address King Ranch bluestem?
So KR bluestem, as you know, y'all are very familiar with AgriLife out of Williamson County, and Ronnie Leps did some studies on that many years ago. If you manage your other grasses, all I can say is it won't drown it completely out, but it'll help you manage your KR. I'll give you an example. That's just a personal example. I have it on my farm in my coastal field, but if I manage my coastal properly, it will drown out, not completely, but it will knock back that KR. The AgriLife, it's interesting that this is brought up. The AgriLife Arocli Red, it's been multiple years ago, and it might have been before Ronnie as well, but was that the seed bank is there, and you're never going to get rid of that seed bank. Kind of like Johnson grass. We always say Johnson grass seed will stay in the ground 7.5. I was always taught in school 7.5 years, but 7 to 10 years, right? And all it takes is a little bit of disturbance to that seed, and here we go. But to address the KR directly, it's to manage our other grasses properly and help kind of push that out. It'll always be there, but that way it's not prolific and take over the right of way.
So somebody had a two-part question. The first part was, what's the one thing that you wish everyone knew about your mission? And the second part is, what's your favorite thing that you've learned doing this job?
So the first one, what I would want everybody to know is that TxDOT is doing everything we can to move forward to go all native. That is my goal. That is my goal. I have 15 years left before I retire. That is my goal. And that's what I want people to know. We have some of the most beautiful country in my opinion. Of course, I'm from Williamson County. I'm from here. This is my home. I've seen the entire state. We have some beautiful country. I've been out of state. There's other parts of the country in the world that are beautiful. And I want to see us go as native as possible and as clean as possible. And your second question was, Mr. Spurlock, do you mind reading that second one?
No, but it says, what's your favorite thing you've learned doing this?
There's so many ways to get to the ultimate goal. And there's so many ways, and none of them are wrong. That's my favorite part. My favorite part is the people I'm meeting inside and outside the agency. My favorite part, the best thing I've ever learned are the people that actually have the passion that we have for what we do. That's my favorite part.
It's always good to work with those people. Paige was wanting to know, how often does upkeep happen in the pollinator gardens? And we're wondering, are they regenerative gardens?
So good question. We've had hiccups with our a couple of our pollinator gardens here and there due to flooding and things of that sort. We do the idea behind them. That's really a question for the Native Plant Society. When they have questions, they'll call me, or it'll get funneled down to me, the questions to the safety rest area guys. It is as regenerative as it can be with the amount of foot traffic walking through them, if that makes any sense. So do they have upkeep? Yes. Do they have to go back in and plant some plants? Yes. How often? It just depends. I don't know. They try and do a yearly cleanup, and then the contractor over the rest area helps too. And one thing I didn't get a chance to talk to y'all about is next time you're coming down 35 southbound, stop at the safety rest area southbound. Instead of going to the left side, go to the right side. That's where the 18-wheelers go. Be very careful. Watch the 18-wheelers. But when you're pulling into that side, you're going to come up to about the first or second light pole on your right. You're going to see some flags out there. And those flags represent a study that I had put together of different mixes. Different wildflowers are in the mixes. The new mixes that we're looking at putting together are out there. Please do not pull the flags up. Please do not pull the flags up. But you're more than welcome to walk around out there and take a look. You might see something that you haven't seen, or some type of side oats grama that's growing a little bit different, or what have you. Now, just to let y'all know, this isn't the only rest area we did this on. I put together 7 rest areas, but Bell County is my closest. Hardeman, we did one in Hardeman. You all saw the pictures of the butterflies there. We've got one down at Cotulla. The one at Cotulla is actually out in the gray water field, which I thought was a good place for it, just because they got a little bit extra moisture. It's kind of my little test areas. So if you're ever going through a rest area, take a look and see if it's got a pollinator garden, or if it's got a little area out back that in the spring has a lot of wildflowers. It's probably a test area that we put in.
And then I think Amanda was just wondering if you mentioned the regenerative agriculture.
I did, and that's kind of like I was talking about. That is a direction that we foresee ourselves going long term in the right of way and regenerative land, and being able to sustain itself, and that be, obviously, like I was talking about earlier. There's some maintenance up front that has to be done, but the ultimate goal is for it to regenerate and take care of itself, which ultimately beautifies our right of way, as well as saves you as a taxpayer a lot of money.
So if you can see it in the chat, somebody's they've got milkweed in the garden. They wonder if they should cut them back to the ground in the winter.
They'll probably, depending if we have a winter like last one, they'll probably burn back, what I call burn back, excuse my terminology, but they'll probably die back to the ground anyway. You can leave it and see what happens. If you do anything, I'd cut it probably around 8 inches off the ground, 7, 8, 10 inches. But more than likely this winter, it'll go ahead and burn back or die back, and it'll come back. If not, make sure you keep some of the pods off of it, and you'll have some seed. And on
Nice.
that note, we'll talk a little bit about the wildflower seeding and the cost. There's a million ways to put together a mix. My objective when I put together a mix is simple is better, because when we do simple is better, we can cover more acres, and we can, that's more pollinator habitat. We're very fortunate. Y'all are familiar with the Zyzotes milkweed, and that was one of the things that TxDOT helped bring to the market. And so we had the Texas Native Seed Program down at Cesar Claiborne, the Tamuk project, do a lot of studies on Zyzotes and collect a lot of seed and grow a lot out for us. And then they passed it off to a seed company, I should say, and ultimately they put it in large breeder blocks. The problem with milkweed seed, as you know, it's a feather. It's got a feather on it. It's extremely hard to get off commercially, and the in turn cost a lot of money. Now, one way they were looking at doing it, they burn it off with a torch. They put it out on concrete, and they burn off the feather with the torch. They put it through a cleaner, and I wish I had a picture of that, in different ways of that. Zyzotes 2-3 years ago was running me about $600 a pound, and that was getting a deal on it. Usually runs around probably about 15,000. Now, mind you, you don't need a pound per acre. You need roughly, I think I read a spec one time, depending on the germination rate on milkweed. And like I said, everybody has their idea on this. I was shooting for 500 seeds per acre, which was, I can't remember how many grams that was. I was ordering per acre for my mix. So, and the others was the other day I called on some other stuff, and it was some other milkweed. And I think it was around 210 a pound. So sometimes you'll see milkweed in our mixes. Sometimes you won't. It just depends. It depends on the price. It depends on what the availability is. And sometimes the seed company will even sell it to you. I don't buy things in packets. I buy it in bulk. So when I go in, I spend $50,000 to $100,000 at a time. I'm actually in the middle of a deal right now of around 60. It's around 64,000. I'll be buying probably next week. And it's all different things. So.
Well, speaking of that, Karen would like to know what your top 5 personal favorite native flowers are.
First and foremost, no questions asked, Maximilian sunflower. We don't plant that in our right of way. We will plant it on non-mow areas because Maximilian sunflower gets too tall. Next one would probably be Indian paintbrush. We've had some issues getting that up, but they have a really good, we got a lot of it up there going through Salado on the east side, the east side of the highway in the spring, if it's a good year for Indian paintbrush. I really like Bee Balm. I just think it's a cool looking plant, comes in all shades and colors. The old steady standby, which is the Indian blanket. I do like the Indian blanket or firewheel, whatever you want to call it. We had a really good year of that. I don't know what number I'm on yet, Mr. Spurlock. I apologize.
That is number 4. So you got one more.
I got one more. Okay. Let's
can't
think
leave
here.
off the state flower.
Well, I do like bluebonnets. So I do like bluebonnets. The thing with bluebonnet, the interesting thing about bluebonnets, typically when you see bluebonnets, it's in marginal soils. Bluebonnets like marginal soils. But I do like bluebonnets. There's not yeah, bluebonnets. That's a good one. So again, great. Just to go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. Finish up, and then we'll ask the next question.
Well, I just was going to make the comment. We were talking about regenerative agriculture and regenerative work along our roadway, and that's something that Amanda Fowler and I have really been. I was just thinking about that. That's something that her and I have been working on. She brought it to the table, and I think it's a great idea. I really do, and so we really want to move forward with that in the future. We're kind of poised right now in our group to really do some changes that are going to be impact long term in a positive way. And I think the regenerative agriculture is something that we really are going to entertain.
Great. So Paige was wondering, does TxDOT do any rainwater collection to use to water some areas?
So interesting. Yes. And so I did not know we did. We are very diverse in what we do, and there's a lot of different departments. But yes. So a lot of our safety rest areas have these huge, and I won't use the word barrels because they're not a barrel, they're huge 2,500, 3,000 gallon tanks under the ground, and they catch the water off the building. And I'm not saying all of them do, and I don't know which ones do and don't, but I do know the Catula one has rainwater collection. And we use that water to go back into our landscape, specifically our plants, not necessarily our grass, but our plants. Great question. I have not had that one in a meeting, but that's awesome. That's a good question.
Nice. And then you mentioned that the bluebonnets like marginal soil. So do you get, do you start out with something like bluebonnets in a marginal soil and then, get it to the point where the soil improves and you change the mix on it?
Typically, and I'm not saying it doesn't only grow in marginal soils, but if I'm driving down the road and I have to laugh because my coworkers always give me a hard time, and I'm talking about plants and they always tell me, so Travis, what's the soil telling you? And if you really look at the plants that are growing, you can pretty much it'll tell you a lot about the soil that's up underneath the plants without even seeing the soil. So are you talking about like rebuilding the soil up over time? I think It would take more than blue bonnets. If we have the blue bonnets there, and then we have some other type of carbon there, plant material there that will break down over time, that's not really trackable. I'm not familiar with that being tracked as far as the TxDOT side goes. That's also a good question. But you do see, back when we had our old supervisor, he would talk about driving down the road and nothing used to grow here. There was a stretch there outside of Llano, and nothing used to grow here. And we'd go down the road and it'd be grass and everything. So I said, well, what happened? He says, well, it just slowly took over. Well, that kind of goes into what you're saying, I think, in the sense that, that's rebuilding the soil long term. And I think that also goes into, as long as we take care of the soil and we maintain and we do our maintenance properly, we are rebuilding our soil.
Nice. So Paige was asking, does TxDOT do any soil amendments?
Yes, actually we do. So as y'all know, I take care of the erosion control, sediment and erosion control. So there are times that we will go in there and put an amendment in with the soil and either till it in. And I'll give you an example of this. There's an area in the Brownwood district. It's up east of Cisco. Is that I-20 or I-10? I get them mixed up. I think it's 20. Out there, it's called Ranger Hill. It's that area. It's a real big, steep area. We have a rest area on the south side of the highway there. Ranger Hill is actually the one on the north side of the road, but this is its sister on the south side. And it's got sugar sand. And we can't get anything to grow in it. So they went in there when they built the rest area and put down the blankets, the old green blankets that are staked in. Still couldn't get anything to grow. Well, one of the reasons is because it's so dry there. It's just a very dry part of Texas. And obviously we need moisture to get things to grow. And what ended up happening was, over time, still not getting anything to grow properly, they'd have a little bit here, a little bit there, and they'd run the mowers in there. And it ripped all the blankets out, and mowers were a problem and what have you. So they brought me in about 3 years ago, year before COVID. And we went in there, we went out there and looked at it. And I said, well, we can't get anything to grow in this sand. It's sugar sand. It's just not going to happen. If y'all are familiar with sugar sand, it's almost like frac sand. It's very, very fine. And I said, we've got to do something on this. So what we ended up doing on that project, or what we are working on doing on that project, is we will go in there with an amendment, and it's going to be a mulch type of amendment. It's going to be it's going to be sieved out a little bit finer so that there's no chunks. We're going to put that down at about a 2-inch layer. We're going to till it in to 4 inches, roughly the whole thing to 4 inches. And then we're going to come back in there and we're going to spray over the top of it with a hydro seeder or hydro mulcher. Everybody uses different terms, but a hydro mulcher, hydro seeder. And it's the type that you see the guys out on the highway or ladies out on the highway spraying, that's green. And we're going to put a tackifier in it, because when they do get a rain, everything washes off. It rills out, gullies out. So we're going to put an extra tackifier in it. We're going to tack it all down. And then they're going to put in temporary irrigation. And that's at the rest area out there. So that's probably more than y'all needed to know. But yes, the answer is yes, we do.
All right. Well, I don't see any more questions right this second, but thanks for planting all those beautiful wildflowers that we get to drive past every year. And thanks again for coming tonight. I'd like to thank everybody else for coming tonight, and want to invite you to join us next month when we're going to have Clint Perkins. He's a graduate research assistant out of Texas Tech University. He is going to tell us about the skunks of Texas, and Mike is going to try to get us that video of the eastern spotted skunk there out on the Texas Nature Trackers. So maybe we'll have that to go. So thanks everyone for joining us, and we will see you next month. Thanks again, Travis.
Thank y'all. Y'all be safe. Take care.